Alright everyone out there in Banjo land, Mike Henning here, coming to you today with kind of an advanced banjo lesson. We're going to talk about some movable single string ideas. So single string, kind of using your thumb and index to mimic a guitar pick, opens up a whole new world of possibilities on the banjo if you feel like breaking out of that standard roll bluegrass sound, which is really cool and has its place. But again, on a slower, bluesier song or a song with a little bit of swing, sometimes mimicking a guitar flat pick using single string ideas can be very powerful. So that's what we're going to talk about for this lesson. Like I said, it's going to be a little bit more advanced, so definitely check out the basic single string lesson I did. Check out that one first, and then check out the Nashville number system lesson I did, because we're going to get into a little bit more advanced theory in this lesson, so definitely check out those lessons first. But let's jump into this lesson on movable single string ideas you can use for different chords all over the neck. Here we go. All right, so I get asked a lot, should I think in terms of scales or chord shapes, or how do I think about improvising or getting around the neck, right? While we do want to think of scales, I think it's much more practical to think out of chord shapes and then kind of build the scales around that. Think of the chord shapes that you've already practiced. We're going to use the three chord shapes, the F shape, D shape, and bar shape, the three standard movable bluegrass chords. Those are going to be our foundation that we can build the scales on top of. I think that's much more practical than just thinking of scales. I don't know, for me, if you just think in terms of scales, the scales get too disconnected from actual chords that you're playing. If you don't connect it to the chord shape, to me it's just not as practical. I have a hard time pulling it out in a jam session. So let's jump into this lesson. So we're going to start with our movable F shape, right? Let's just do it in G, and later on we'll show you how to move it around. All these licks aren't going to use any open strings, so we can actually play this wherever we want. So first thing we're going to do is, again, just recognize where to play that scale, the major scale in this case, out of our chord shape. So we can do it this way. Or you can switch back to your third finger. There's different ways. Remember, the left hand is going to change depending on where you're going next, right? So you could start it with your third finger if you want, and do that shift. Or you can start with your pinky. It just depends on where you're going next, right? So that's what you always want to think about. Another way you can do that same scale is up here. One note higher if you want. What I like to do is think of kind of the symmetry and look at it as a pattern, right? So it does two notes on each string except for this one. So it does two notes and then three notes, and then two and two. Actually go down one more if you want to add that third note. So actually you can do three on that one. It starts one note below the scale, but same idea, right? If you want to end it. So that'd be the first thing, is maybe just kind of running up and down that major scale. Remember, you don't have to go straight up and down. You can stay on one note a while. Slide into the notes. And what I would encourage you to do there is think of these, your chord tones, right, as your strong notes. Those are the notes I might want to slide into. Those are the notes I kind of want to highlight. And then use my other scale notes as kind of passing notes, right? Like that. End on one of the chord tones, right? If you end on the root note, it's going to sound the most complete. If you end on the fifth or the third, it's going to sound a little jazzier, but it'll work. Definitely, anytime you're trying some new ideas like this, don't expect you to come up with some genius stuff right off the bat. The first couple things you come up with might not be that interesting. That's okay. That's part of the process. You're just getting used to using these as a position. Just think of it as a position you can use, okay? So like I said, you can move that anywhere, right? So if you start it, you can do it on G, right? Do it on your C. Or D, right? Same thing. All the way up on your high G, way up here, right? trying to see that symmetry in my mind. And I'm always going back to the chord shape, right? That's my foundation. That's what I'm leaning on. So if I see if I'm here, right, maybe I'm vamping. Just kind of, again, just playing around, seeing what I can come up with, right? You know, do some hammer on. Yeah. Or skip every other note. Like that can sound cool. Like that idea can sound cool. So again, just play around with it wherever. You don't even have to know what, you know, let's say you're trying to figure out a song. You can just move it around and tell you, oh, that sounds good. I don't even know what that is. Oh, okay, that's B flat, right? So it's, again, I'm not using any open strings at all. So I can play this wherever. If I just think of it as a pattern, I don't necessarily even have to know what key I'm playing, and I can just play out of that shape once I get familiar with it. And then I'm just figuring out where to end. So that's one idea you can use out of that. Another thing you can do is like pentatonic. So thinking out of this shape, I could use major pentatonic. That can have a very cool sound. It almost kind of has like an E minor-ish sound. Or like triplets. Can sound cool like on that pentatonic. So I'm just playing like a triplet on those pentatonics. I'm just going back and forth. That can have a very kind of cool repeating pattern idea. Skip around, doing some different intervals rather than just going straight up and down, which is kind of what you do at first, right? See if you can do some different jumps, like jumping from the 6th note of the scale, right? Let's go back to major for a second. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, right? So think of each of those notes has a different kind of tension and feel, right? So that'd be like 3, 5, 3, 1. Again, just kind of practice hearing that in your head too. That jump. How big is that interval? There's a lot of things you can do when you're practicing this stuff that goes beyond just the physical remembering and memorizing, right? You're getting that ear training if you connect it in your head. Okay, that's a 3, third note. I'm sliding into that 3rd note of the scale, going up to the 5, and then sliding back, and then down to the root. Or like that. That'd be 3, 5, 3, 2, 1, right? So again, starting to hear those intervals in your head, you'll be able to pick that out in a melody in the future. Another very common one is like 6 to the root. That's like more of like a Western swing kind of interval you might hear. Something like that. Or so just playing around with those different intervals. Sometimes it helps break you out of a box. For me, I don't know, sometimes I get stuck in kind of like always playing notes that are real close to each other. Even if I'm playing like a scale idea, I'm always kind of sticking with those notes that are very close together, which has a nice sound because they're close together, but if you want to get a little bit more outside of the box, playing some different intervals can be very cool. The other thing I'll do is like do some cool rhythms. Swing or early jazz ideas, just playing a single note, but playing a really cool, funky, interesting swing and rhythm. Yeah, again, I'm just playing around, but you get the idea where you don't always have to move the notes as much. You can play just something kind of funky and get a cool rhythm going. That can be a very powerful solo. A lot of times more powerful than just playing a bunch of left-handed notes. If you want like a little bit more of a minor pentatonic sound, sometimes I like to just keep this symmetry. I'll show you how to do a true minor pentatonic would be this. would be kind of the notes. But sometimes I like to just keep the symmetry, and then you can just do 5, 3, 5, 3, 5, 3, 5, 3, 5. It's not true minor pentatonic, but it still works. If you want the true minor pentatonic, you need to leave this 5th fret out on the 2nd string. But for me, that just doesn't, I can't do that quite as fast. I like, again, the symmetry, like I'm saying. So what I would do is experiment with that and then combine it back with the major sound. So you hear those, you start training your ear to hear those different sounds. So going more minor, now go back major. Minor. You can do those triplets, can sound cool and that kind of stuff. Something like that. So that's what I would practice there. So another thing you can do that gets more outside of the box, but this is something I learned from one of my banjo teachers, Alex Genova, who's a great banjo teacher. Leads definitely more on the jazzy side of things, but he can play traditional bluegrass as well. But this is an idea from Barry Harris, a great jazz educator, that's going to allow us to add some chromaticism in cool ways that basically allows our ear to stay connected to the chord, but we get to add these chromatic notes. So let me show you how to do it, and I'll break down a little bit of the theory, but I'll show you kind of just the underlying concept of why it works. So we're working out of our F shape here for the first pattern to remember, and what we're going to do is we're going to play that major scale, but we're going to add one note, this 3rd fret. So we have... So what we're doing, two things, is we're changing it from a 7-note scale to an 8-note scale. So it lands evenly. The other thing we're doing is if you break down how those notes work out, we're basically playing a G7 chord on all the strong downbeats, and then we're adding those other notes in between. So if you look at the downbeats, we have... Right? And now we're adding those chromatic notes in between. Your ear hears those strong beats. So what's cool about this technique is it allows you to add chromatic outside notes, but the listener's ear still stays connected to that underlying chord, where if you just add the chromatic notes anywhere, and those chord tones don't stay on the strong beats, your ear doesn't stay connected to the chord. It just sounds kind of like you lost your place. Where if you do it this way, and those notes stay on the strong beats, then it sounds more connected to the listener's ear. So you can think about the theory if you want, or you can just literally memorize this pattern. Remember, you don't have to go all the way down. You could do like... That's one I'll do a lot. Another thing I'll use a lot is something called like an enclosure. Again, a jazz term, but it works well, right? So you take your notes and you enclose the chord tones. A lot of times you'll do like a scale note above and a chromatic note below, right? So I'm going one scale tone above, and then a chromatic note below the chord tone. So something like that. And there's different ways you can do it. You can do it with all chromatic notes. Depends on how far outside you want to get from the sound. But basically just remember that we have our chord tones, right? For that chord, doesn't matter. You can do it with any chord if you're playing a 7th chord, right? And you're just enclosing those notes. Right? So you can do it, just get used to that sound of enclosing that note. And that's what we're doing. So like when I run down that, so that'd be like ending it with that enclosure. It has a very jazz or swing sound. Or something like that. Or, so you're enclosing that note you want to hear, but you get a little bit of that outside sound for a quick second. But you could also just go down and end on the B. Like, the other thing I'll do a lot is like do a triplet. So I'll break my single string rule here, and I'll do a thumb index middle with my right hand. Like that. It kind of has a very cool jazzy sound. Like.